Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink in Prince George, British Columbia. Prince George, for those of you that are watching from far away, British Columbia is the most beautiful province in Canada, and then Prince George is virtually the center of British Columbia, about 800 kilometers north of Vancouver. Our guest today is a special guest. I've known him for many, many years. He has a very interesting background. His name is Rob from Adrichem.
Yeah.
Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yes, and so tell us a bit about yourself and your background. Now, it kind of sounds to me like I may be wrong here, that Rob from Adrichem sounds kind of Dutch to me.
Kind, just a little bit. A klein beetje, as they would say in
a
Dutch.
A klein beetje, as we say in Holland, right?
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Prince George.
Okay.
My parents came here in 1962. I grew up just over here, actually, a couple of blocks from where we are right now.
Miller Edition?
Miller Edition, yeah.
On what street?
Ingledew Street.
Ingledew, yeah. Okay, I lived in Gorse.
I remember. I used to deliver newspapers too in that neighborhood, so I remember where you lived, and absolutely, I spent a lot of time in Clayton Park. That's where I that was like my backyard.
Yeah.
Played tennis on the tennis court, and
yeah.
Baseball at Gyro Park. It was the best play. I mean, you talk about Prince George being a beautiful place. It was the best place to grow up.
No question
in that neighborhood. Literally walk downtown for whatever you need. Walk to the park, walk to the river, hang out with your friends. It was the best.
And it getting better and better all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because in the 60s, it was still semi-boom town and maturing. And then since that time, all kinds of things happened. And we're going to talk about that a lot actually today. Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind is College of New Caledonia. Yeah. The other one that comes to mind big time is UNBC, University of Northern British Columbia, the best small university in Canada.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk about that quite a bit because that's where you spend a lot of your time. So I want to know a little bit more about your background or your family's background in Holland.
Okay.
So your family came from Holland. Which part of Holland?
My parents are both from the sort of the western part near The Hague, west of Rotterdam, in that area. Lots of greenhouses there now, and that's where my parents are from. After World War II, they left and they came to Canada. And
after World War II?
Correct.
That was in 1945. When did they come to Canada?
They left in 1952.
Oh, in 1952.
Yeah, it's an unbelievable. I mean, imagine you're from Holland, this little country. They took a boat to Halifax, and then a train across Canada all the way. I can only imagine what they were thinking.
4 days, 5 nights. I did it too.
Yeah, my hat's off to those of you who did that.
What made them come to Canada?
Opportunity. Still today. That's how people come here, and to places like Prince George. It's fantastic. The things the opportunity that you can have, and at the same time, it was. I mean, I don't know this, thankfully, but it must have been hard there. So much destroyed
after the war, right?
Yeah,
the Second World War.
Yeah, and so they came to Vancouver Island.
Right.
My dad worked at the experimental farm, and then
was a government place where they experimented with different things.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I should have. So he did a lot of work on crops, and then in 1962, so 10 years later, they moved to Prince George, and my dad worked at the experimental farm here, which was by the airport.
Yeah,
lots of people remember the barn with the rainbow on the side, and so he worked there for a long time and worked on winter hardiness of different fruits and vegetables. Worked on strawberries, on potatoes, and did a lot of that. I mean, it's interesting. Way back then, there was research in Prince George. This was way before university. Yeah, and there was research going on in Prince George. Yeah.
And, so why did they close it? I wonder.
Well, that's another whole question. I barely remember my dad. I remember my dad working there and driving, because they would cross the railroad bridge. That's when when the
The
cars went on the
single-lane
railroad
bridge on
That's
each
right.
side, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
I really remember that as a kid going over that bridge. And
Yeah.
so I remember him going to work, but I don't remember sort of all the politics of why it was closed down.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were doing research there, and like I said, his specialty was on winter hardiness of fruits and vegetables.
Right. How many siblings did you have?
I have 6 sisters and
Six sisters?
and 1 brother. Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And are they all in the region here? Or?
No, and actually most of them were born on Vancouver Island. So
Okay.
here's my parents coming to Prince George in the winter of 1962 with 5 little kids.
Yeah.
And then myself and my 2 closest sisters were born here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have a big family, and that's been
Yeah.
great. I have 1 sister who's still in Prince George.
Yeah, yeah.
And everyone else is my
All
brother's
over
in
the place,
Korea,
yeah.
and they're all over the place. Yeah.
Any in Holland?
Nope. I still have family there,
Yeah, yeah.
cousins and aunts and uncles. But a lot of my dad's side ended up coming to Canada, actually.
Yeah. Now, what happened is after the Second World War, because it was such a tough go, and I was born in 1945. I
Okay.
remember the war well. I was 5 years old, and I was in the extreme northeastern part of Holland, where the Canadians came through Holland and through Zeeland, the islands, and then Westland, Rotterdam, along Amsterdam, and they pushed the invading armies through Groningen back into Germany. And then we were living right there within 10 minutes of the German border.
Oh, wow.
And I still remember planes overhead.
I'm sure,
I remember, the Germans retreating and the Canadians right behind them, and war going on. They blew up the bridges, and a lot of bad things happened. And then the winter of 44, 45 was what they called Hunger
Winter, yeah.
And then my mom had 3 kids. I was the youngest, born in 1940, and then a brother that was 1 year older, and a sister was 2 years older.
Okay.
And then my dad was drafted into the Dutch army. In early 1940. They were defeated in a matter of days by what we call the Blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
And it's so current because that's what we see in the Ukraine, is where the Russians are tried with a blitzkrieg, overrun the other country and put it into submission. It obviously is still a work in progress. It's terrible, the things that are happening. But then with my dad, the last time that we heard from him, or my family heard from him, that when the Germans, to try to submit the Dutch, bombed Rotterdam, although they already committed, the Dutch already committed they would surrender, but they still bombed the center of Rotterdam. And that's the last place they saw my dad.
Wow.
And we didn't know for 5 years as to what happened to him. Now this brings it home to you indirectly, is because what happened, he fled with a lot of other soldiers into what they called Westland.
Yeah.
That's where your parents are from.
Yeah.
And in particular a town called Schravenzande.
Oh, yeah.
That was there.
Yeah.
And that's where he was underground and worked for the resisting forces underneath it. And to get a picture of it for our guest watching, Westland then already was a lot of glass houses where they grew tomatoes and grapes and all kinds of, still
Peppers,
today. If you fly over there, all you see is glass houses, and they have these little canals, and they haul all the fruits that they grow to the marketplace on the boats, and all of it's beautiful, beautiful, close to the sea,
really
but it wasn't then. So then when he came back finally in April of 1945, they hadn't really heard of him, and for all intents and purposes, they thought he had died. But he had a helmet with him with a bullet right through it. They caught him in Westland, and they nearly killed him, chasing him through the glass structures.
Interesting.
But he survived.
Jeez.
At least physically. Mentally, a lot of those individuals that went through all of this, it affected them for the rest of their life the same will happen as we look at the Ukraine and the things happen. I know it from myself. It will affect the young people and the people, of all the ages for the rest of their lives.
I went back to Holland in '95 for the 50th anniversary of the liberation. It was a real.
I was there too.
It was like to be somebody from Canada who was born from Dutch parents, to have had that opportunity is something I'll never forget. And to see, it's incredible at that time. That was only 50 years before that this stuff was going on. And to have been able to be there and to get a sense of sort of Canada's contribution, if I can put it that, it sounds kind of weird, but there's just great appreciation there, I think, for this country, and it's something that will always be with me.
From the small little kids up.
Absolutely.
Canada.
No, it's young people there. And they weren't there. Like it wasn't that there was a whole bunch of veterans there.
It
was
young
people.
Forward, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what I've done, Rob, is that for at least 10 or 11 or 12 years, I try always at the 11th when we remember the war and we have the 2 minutes of silence.
Yeah.
I speak to a number of schools, usually 3 or 4, and down the coast and here in northern BC, to talk about what does it really mean? Why do we have the 2 minute silence? Into how quickly it all can change for all the things we take for granted. And overnight it changes. Now, obviously, again, talking about the Ukraine, we see it on the television happen, and that's what happened in Holland and those countries as well. How quickly it all changed, and and the appreciation, obviously, of the Canadians that, for all intents and purposes, liberated Holland is still deeply, deeply enrooted and remains there.
Oh, right? Absolutely. No, it's I actually was, it's funny when Canada made it to the World Cup in soccer, I was really hoping that they would play in the Dutch group. Because I think it's one of the things that I would be willing to bet you that if Holland was playing Canada in the World Cup, there'd be a lot of people in Holland cheering for Canada.
Oh, yeah.
And that would just, and I've never experienced, no one's experienced Canada playing Holland in the World Cup. And it would be, I thought, I was really hoping, but they're playing Belgium. I'm sure they'll get a lot of Dutch people cheering for Canada.
No question about it. We were liberated April the 12th, 1945 in the town that I lived in. And then the Canadians that liberated us, things were very, very difficult for quite a number of years. And behind us was a little schoolyard. And every morning at daybreak, all the kids would go down there and they feed them bread with the butter and cheese, and the butter and cheese was bigger than the bread, and we were all called Johnny. We didn't speak the language, but we did, right?
All called Johnny. That's funny.
And then from that point forward, I always knew that I would go to Canada, to the land of my heroes. Right? And I did. So always stayed with me.
I've always kind of wondered that too, the extent to which how did that influence my parents coming here? I assume it did. But it's such a different, I can only imagine back then that this place was so big compared to what they were used to. But
the fear then was, because I had several uncles and aunts and family members that emigrated to either the States or to Canada. And one of the reasons was that they did it to give their kids a future. And the other one was the fear of that the Russians would come in, pushing the Germans out and submission, and then the Russians would take over Europe, or the free Europe. And the first thing they would do, identify the underground, or the resistance, and clean them up and kill them, right? And so a lot of people were afraid of that, and subsequently left.
Interesting times.
So that kind of tells us a little bit about background. Now, the other thing that you were so involved from the time that I initially knew you with UNBC, and and UNBC, for our guest, is the University of Northern British Columbia that came about actually in the 80s. and then the government committed to building a University of Northern British Columbia. I was quite involved in it because I was a writing president for Prince George North at the time, and politics has a lot to do with that because that's where the funding comes from.
Absolutely.
And and the incumbent government was in power, and so the push behind the University of Northern British Columbia was amazing. A lot of people, key individuals, Murray Sadler, and a whole bunch of other people, were encouraging everybody to support it throughout Northern BC, and then 16,000 people signed, for the and paid the $5 for this group to support UNBC. And then I think it was in the late 80s, 87, 88, that we had a writing annual meeting of the Socrates in Penticton, and we had busloads of people going down there with buttons of UNBC and signs, and we kind of took over the whole convention because we were going to have this university, and not just a university, a subsidiary of somebody else, but a freestanding university. And then finally in 1989, they signed off on the legislation to create a University of Northern British Columbia, and the rest is history.
Sort of,
because
that
it's
makes
still
it sound
a
like it
work
was
in
easy
progress, right?
That's right.
So, but you became involved, virtually from the beginning.
Yes, sort of from the beginning. So when I grew up in Prince George and went to BCIT for journalism school after I went to CNC for a year. And so I went to BCIT, the British Columbia Institute of Technology, did journalism there, got my first job at what now is, it was CJCI in 94X, and at the radio station in Prince George. And so I remember some of the first, I actually distinctly remember the first live news conference we ever covered was when Bruce Strachan, the Minister of Advanced Education at the time, announced the location of the campus. That was the first live news conference we did with a cell phone that was as big as your coffee table.
Exactly.
And so that really started my connection with UNBC. At BCIT, we had to do a radio documentary for one of our assignments. And I did it on the creation of the University of the North. So it's been really part of me my entire career.
Right.
And that's also, it's been a real gift to have had that opportunity to be part of something that really is more than just sort of an institution of higher learning. It's more than a place for people to send their kids to get education. It's the expression of the will of the region. And that's the part of it that I always found so fascinating. I mean, you talk about the Canadian soldiers being your heroes, and I never really thought of it really until just now. But some of those people that you refer to, Murray Sadler and Tom Stedman and Horst Sander and Elsie Gerdes and so many, Ed John, so many of those people that were part of it were kind of, I had never seen anything like that in my life. I'd never seen it up until that time, a group of people from here saying, this is what we're going to do.
It has to happen.
It was never sort of a question.
No.
Even though looking back on it, it should never have happened. Like they should never have been successful when you look at the population.
There was so much other pressure on government because there's only so much money available. And Stan Hagen, I believe, was the Minister of Finance, and who got a lot of pressure from different but we were not going to be denied.
No.
That was no question about it.
No, and I don't remember being here at the time ever thinking that we wouldn't succeed. It was just a question of sort of when. And maybe a bit of how, but never if. And I remember too some of the early, I remember talking about Stan Hagen, I remember the article, I think it was in the Globe and Mail, that they did a story about this sort of university being talked about in northern BC for some reason.
It was not a good article.
And well, it ended up being a great article because it galvanized support. So Stan Hagen apparently was quoted in this article as saying, asked, are they going to have a university in the north? And he goes, well, they don't need it. All they care about in the north is how many trees did you cut down today, or how are things down in the mine? that was apparently what he said.
But it triggered something else, right?
Oh, there's nothing that brings people together than a common villain.
Yeah.
And I have heard from people that maybe Stan was a misquote, or I should say that Minister Hagen was misquoted. I have heard that maybe he didn't exactly say that, but it had the effect of if there was any doubt up to then, there was no doubt after that
Correct.
the North would not be denied.
Yeah.
And so it really, in some ways, was seen, I think, at the time as a blow to the Northern campaigners.
Yeah.
But it ended up being the exact ammunition that they needed.
Yeah. No. And no question about that.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Fascinating. And then, to have then something like that, and then the legislation was passed, I believe, in '89, and then from there on in, it became a question of location.
Yeah.
And then it became a question of what will it look like, and how do we start,
and the programs,
and the programs,
yeah.
and all the other things that follow the
faculty.
decision.
Yeah.
And what it is now, it is absolutely beautiful and fabulous. Since that time, obviously, the medical part of it, and then the connection to the hospital.
Yes.
And
it's transformative.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they'll never be the same here.
No.
And that's for the better. Like, that's so significant.
The whole region.
Absolutely. Right? No, and I think you could even say Northern Canada.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're able to do here for the benefit of the territories or Northern Saskatchewan. I know people who were some of the early faculty at UNBC, now working at University of Saskatchewan, bringing some of that same mindset, that same sort of vision to there. It's fantastic what universities can do with tentacles, how they reach out is mind-boggling. The effect that they can have just because of the work that they do, the research that they do, the innovation that emerges from it, the young and not so young people who go through it and get a kind of an education. It's not, education isn't the same everywhere. And we used to talk about that a lot, that there's a certain aptitude, there's certain things that you learn that might be the same at UNBC as the University of Toronto or the University of Paris. But then there's a whole bunch of other things about how you think about things, not just what you know of things, that comes through your experiences and the kind of education that we were able to deliver here in the region, in indigenous communities, in hospitals, in real places, not perfect labs. I think that the people, and there's a couple of them in this room with me, that have graduated from that place, they will make contributions that will change this place. Yeah.
I'm an alumni of UNBC.
So we're all alumni in this room right now.
And so I tell the story all the time. At one point a number of months ago, I think we had 6 or 8 people sitting around our boardroom table as we were deliberating where the Brink group is going and what it is doing and blah blah blah, all that kind of stuff. And say, at one point saying, something, every single one around this table is an alumni of the University of Northern British. Can you imagine that?
I sure can. And it's going to become normal all the time around here.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. I think the thing that I really value the most from my time at UNBC was getting to know thousands of students. Because I go around with the camera or the video camera, and we did a lot of stuff like this at UNBC to just help people spread the word about the place. Exactly. And the people I got to meet, that now I sort of see that some of them are in Africa, some of them are in Europe, some of them work for the United Nations,
all
big
over
corporations,
the world,
all over, and just to have been able to sort of be part of their development for one period of time, I think is great. But I think I have a perspective on that's very unusual, and I wish sometimes that people had sort of some sort of indication maybe on their forehead, UNBC grad, because it would shock people in Prince George and all of Northern BC.
No question about
if they could see, holy, all of these people are grads of that place.
And they're all here in the region as well.
Yeah, all over the region. And they're doctors and teachers and chiefs and mayors, and they're all over.
Now, your role was there when you started as director of communications.
No, I started as a media relations officer.
Okay.
So my job was to talk to the media.
Yeah.
We did a TV show on Shaw Cable.
So when did
I start?
Yeah.
1992. I had turned 22 about 4 weeks before I started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I never went to university.
No.
I'd never gone to a university.
No.
I never had that opportunity.
Yeah.
I lived growing up in Prince George to go
Yeah.
to university. So this was pretty crazy talking about a university and having never been to one. So one of the first things I did in the 90s was I thought I better start taking some courses and practice what I preach.
Yeah.
So, which was also fantastic and terrific opportunities.
But you were there for 30 years?
No, it probably seemed like, no, just kidding. I was there from 1992 to 2015.
To 2015,
yeah,
1992.
Yeah, so 23 years.
23 years?
Yeah.
Well, that's a long time.
It was a long time, more than half of my life I
My
was at UNBC.
God.
Yeah.
And then now, just to kind of continue on UNBC, I was so fortunate to have the new president, the first interim president, Dr. Jeff Payne, and now recently appointed as president of UNBC as a guest last week, I think. And so we had a huge opportunity to to talk about the university, to talk about all the things that are going on, but not only what is going on, where do we go from here, what will happen next, and all those other things around it, So, and in particular, between UNBC, the College of New Caledonia, which is amazing in its own right, and then looking at the university and the college and all the satellites they have all over, because this university, this college in Prince George is the capital, I call, of northern British Columbia. But for our guests watching, if we're sitting in the middle of the province, which is 800 kilometers to north of Vancouver, 800 kilometers north from here is the Yukon border.
Yeah.
And then the same looking at either direction, east or west. This is big territory.
Yeah. I remember in those early days talking about the founding of UNBC, people talking about a region the size of France with 300,000 odd, bit more than that, people. Which, looking back on that, that should never have supported a university.
No.
That just the odds that had to be overcome. This place in many ways, UNBC, I should say, was modeled after universities in northern Sweden, northern Finland, Norway, and those places were very similar, pretty sparsely populated, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
But there too, I think there's a bit of a different, how those universities developed, again, was far more than sort of just, if I could put it that way, places to go for an education.
Yeah.
These were places, as UNBC is, that I don't think we talk about enough, as places that are really at the forefront of our research and innovation in our context. I think that's really important. It's not just about education or research for the sake of it. It's education and research within this context for this place.
Yeah,
and that's very different. And I don't know if the founders actually get enough credit for making or putting the conditions in place that would actually also make UNBC very good. Like, it's number one in Maclean's ranking. Not that that's the be all and end all kind of,
no, but
still, whatever. It's still it's great, and very research intensive. That was not. When you say that, it was created and the rest is history, that was not a foregone conclusion, and that took real, constant, to this day, effort to make sure that it's an excellent university. It's research intensive.
Yeah.
It is absolutely relevant to its place, and takes the experience of this place and brings it to the world.
Yeah.
That, I think, is all very unusual, and I think we should, I think as people who just live here, whether you're alumni business people, citizens of any kind, I think there's still a lot of work for us all to do to support these places, to support UNBC, to support CNC.
No question.
It's very difficult, I think, to keep this up. And I think the fact that faculty in the medical school go to the grocery store and people, thank them. I think that's really important. Whatever people who live here can do to support these institutions, I think they should do it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You see, the same is that, in terms of, it was a challenge to get it off the ground and get it to accept it because of all the things that you already said. Studies were done in Sweden and other places extensively to say it can be done and this is what it looks like. But even then, it is amazing that it happened at that point. But it's the driver between change in northern British Columbia. And the facts still remain, Rob, that northern British Columbia produces 80% of the GDP in the province of British Columbia. And I always say to my fellows in Vancouver, hey guys, don't forget about it. So that's where it comes from. And the opportunities here, I always believed, and I've been here since 1965, so it's 57 years or so, that I deeply believe in the opportunities that exist in northern British Columbia. We have the resources, we have the location in terms of the world market, we have the transportation infrastructure, road, rail, air, and all of those things we have. We can attract entrepreneurship, we can attract capital, we can attract innovation and all of those things. The key determining factor will become access to a skilled workforce.
At brains.
If that will be the key factor to attract capital at the end of the day. And I said it when I had the opportunity to support part of the College of New Caledonia, and I still believe that in the university as well. And I believe that we now have to go even one step further, and I call it a center of excellence in terms of developing between the College of New Caledonia and UNBC to focus on something that kind of looks in a way like BCIT. Obviously, BCIT is massive in terms of intake, but we still have an opportunity to further develop those areas in terms of developing new technology, in terms of equipment that we use for how do we manufacture finished products from these resources that we have. And how do we incorporate the skill sets that we need for tomorrow's manufacturers, and all of those things, and how do we stimulate entrepreneurship. I believe that is still something that we have to do, and I've been actively involved in saying we need to develop a center of excellence that focuses on those areas. And
I'd add one thing to what you're saying. I agree with all of that, and I would add, after your sentences, in a carbon-constrained world.
Absolutely.
So as we are imagining our future that is with lower emissions of greenhouse gases, increased senior government and corporate interest in doing things that have a lower carbon footprint, we have to be leading on that. And I think that's another opportunity that we have.
Especially here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, more than anywhere else that I know of, especially here. And we have the resources to do it, we have the land base to do it, and all the other things. And to be a leader in that area in particular, that people come from far and wide to see how we do it and how can it be done. And again, those institutions will be critical for all of that.
We have examples of that now.
Yeah.
There are people I know that come from all over to look at the Wood Innovation and Design Center.
Yeah.
And I've toured people who have come from all over to see UNBC, and in particular the bioenergy plant.
Yeah.
I think that we are doing this, and I think that there's a belief, maybe in the region, or in places like Prince George, or in British Columbia as a whole, we in British Columbia broadly, and I agree with you about the north, but I think the opportunity is broader. We can do this. And the best part is we are. And we have things to show. Right below the street, right below our feet, is a district energy system that was I remember this a couple of years ago when it was minus 40.
Yeah.
We were setting sort of marks in Prince George that people who studied this in Ottawa, in Toronto, had never seen a district energy system running 100% on renewable energy, heating a place of this size at minus 40.
Yeah.
Never.
No.
So we're doing this, and that to me is the most exciting part of this future that we have is and going back to the university and the infrastructure we have and the natural assets that we have.
Yeah.
These also position us to be able to shift our attention to the important issues and the future, and that increasingly is involving low carbon and recognition of greenhouse gases.
No question about that. And I agree with you. We already are leading. We got to go beyond that and say we are the leaders.
Absolutely.
And therefore, what we have to do, government policy in terms of funding that is required for whatever we have to do, we have to say, no, we are the leaders. This is the area where we want to do that. We already can show the results. And so that, because if we don't believe, who will?
That's
and
right.
we do believe, and we
That's
have
right.
the examples of it,
That's right.
I want to talk to you about, I can talk for you for hours and hours, obviously, so I just want to take you just one step further forward, and you then left UNBC and you got a position with the city of Prince George as a communications director, or
that's a director of external relations it was called. But it was generally around telling the community what's going on at the city, basically.
Yeah. So quite a change of scenery in a way, but not really in another, right?
I always say people, it's a different organization, but it's still Prince George. And it was again a really so at UNBC too. In addition to my job, I was very fortunate to be able to take courses there, and so I ended up with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I ended up doing a lot of my coursework on government, and in particular, I had a real interest, largely because of the work in Scandinavia that led to the establishment of UNBC. That everything comes full circle. But real interest of local government, and so there was it was a terrific opportunity to be able to join the city. I literally, my going away party at UNBC was the exact anniversary of the passing in the legislature of the act that created UNBC 25 years later. So to be able to be part of the 25th anniversary and then feel very good about exploring a new opportunity in local government was fantastic, and I learned a lot. I mean, I remember as a reporter covering city council telling people at the time, geez, I learned more in 2 years covering council than I had learned in the previous 20 years living here. And that was, multiply that by 100 actually working in the city. I learned so much about Prince George, and really came to appreciate a lot of these things that we're talking about in terms of these fantastic opportunities that we have. And so then when the opportunity came to then start to apply this interest that I've been cultivating since early days at UNBC around low carbon and the ability to address things like climate change through local action, how could I say no? It was a fantastic opportunity to join this rapidly growing organization, the Community Energy Association. So it all worked out for me really well, and I really appreciated my time at the city. Just local government is, nobody paid me to say this. They're underappreciated. Council and staff. It's really hard work, and this Prince George is something like 330 square kilometers of space. If you took
physically big,
300 and for a city of 75,000 odd people.
I
mean, that's unheard of in a European context.
And
if you were to take all the pipe that we never see, water pipes, stormwater pipes, sewer pipes, and lay it all end to end, it would go from Prince George to Winnipeg.
And under extreme conditions, 40 below is not
40
out
below
of the
to 40
norm.
above this past year. So huge extremes, just so difficult, like such a huge job to keep a city like this running. And so that to have been part of that team of people is again something I'll never forget. Great people, great commitment to Prince George.
So how long were you?
6 years. I was at the city for 6 years.
Yeah, and then,
which seems short after being at UNBC for 23.
Yeah, but then you made another move within the same region, and you became communications director for.
And so now I'm the same title, Director of External Relations for an organization called the Community Energy Association.
So what does that mean, or what does it do?
Yeah, what is this place? I get that question all the time. Everybody knows what UNBC or the city is, but not as many people know what the Community Energy Association is. So CEA grew out of a committee that the government, the two government ministries, Energy and Mines and Municipal Affairs, provincial government, provincial government, and the Union of BC Municipalities, which is the Association of BC Cities and Towns, 25 years ago said, local governments need help in this whole energy issue with energy planning and energy efficiency and energy transition. Who's going to help them? And so they created a committee at first, and then that grew into this thing called the Community Energy Association. So this organized, and I like it because it really takes in a lot of my background in education and innovation and knowledge, but also local government and how we can start to blend all of this together, bring our know-how and our smarts together with infrastructure and municipal planning, and create places that are really innovative in this future world where we're trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprint. And places like Prince George, Northern BC. I mean, I remember at UNBC writing articles with the faculty on research they were doing on climate change, the pine beetle, what was happening in the north. There were some researchers actually at UNBC who were some of the first to document that climate change was happening more at higher latitudes. So the further north you go, the more effects. The higher you go, so higher latitudes, higher altitudes, climate was already, this was happening. And people were seeing this. They were documenting it in their research right here at UNBC. And so to be able to now take all of this and help communities from Hazelton to Vancouver do things in the local level to really allow their communities to be at the forefront of creating communities that don't emit as much greenhouse gas. And lo and behold, how that produces or provides economic opportunities, how that creates a healthier population, how that also maybe means more affordability. I mean, we spend millions on energy in a place like Prince George. Imagine if it was all local. What that would mean to stimulate the local economy. And so there's all sorts of this. That's just fascinating.
Yeah, in a lot of people's mind, they said that is more expensive.
Yeah.
You know, so it costs too much. That's not so, right?
It doesn't have to be. No. I think there are examples where it is, but I think increasingly people are starting to see that even an electric car, for example, over the life of the vehicle saves money from, a regular car. I think too, I'm becoming more exposed in my new job to people who build houses, and what these builders who are building very energy efficient homes are saying that this is a mind shift. Once you're building super energy efficient homes, and once you know how to do it, it doesn't have to cost much more.
No.
It all comes down to sort of how you approach your work. And so again, I think when I think about Prince George, man, I don't know of too many communities that produce as many building materials as Prince George. And so if there is a transformation happening in construction, well then I think the place that makes a lot of lumber and a lot of panels potentially has something to really participate in this. And that's what I find so fascinating as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we do in my company is that the Brink Group, we are lumber manufacturers, and then there's one silo, and then the other silo is logistics and warehousing, and the other silo is real estate, residential, and commercial and industrial. But talking about the residential part now, that we right now building and doing about 2 or 3 subdivisions.
Right.
But we very knowingly or very aware of the green building things that we want to do, and for us to incorporate not what it is but where it goes. All of those things to us as a developer are extremely important.
Yeah.
To incorporate that into today's houses.
Yeah, I didn't know, honestly, I didn't know very much about this 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But I'm learning a lot. I find it fascinating. I think, you know, and you would be a better one to talk about this, but, you know, a lot of people say homes shouldn't be too airtight, homes breathe. And the way I've come to learn about this from some of the builders is we breathe too, but we don't breathe over every square inch of our body. We breathe in one place. And homes can be built that way too. Exactly. And if you'd be much better off controlling the flow of air in and out, than letting this breathing happen everywhere willy-nilly.
No,
I don't. So it's fascinating. And I think too that we've been thinking, like just even myself as a homeowner, I think more, or have thought, I should say, more about heating than cooling. Yeah. But I think, you know, this past summer, my mom lives in a place, she's 94, she lives in a place with no cooling. It was over 30 degrees in there during the heat dome. I have a heat pump in my house that provides heat when I need it and provides cooling when I need it. And she came to stay with us for a week because it was comfortable in my home compared to hers. Yeah. And I think this is also where this conversation, I think, is starting to change about that energy efficiency isn't just about saving money. It's about having comfortable places to live.
Exactly.
And it's increasingly, I think, about cooling as well as heating. And again, I think this is an area where we can do some really neat things in BC and in places like Prince George that I think I'd love to see people come here from elsewhere and see how we're doing it.
Yeah, and the other part about it, Rob, is that from the entrepreneurial perspective, is that the marketplace will demand it. So the entrepreneur or the developer or the builder will incorporate it, because if they want to have a product that is saleable, in particular is today, then they must then think about that in terms of how can we incorporate that to be ahead of what the market at some point will demand. No question about that.
I get the impression that we're probably at a stage still right now where the codes and even the builders to some degree are leading the market. But I get the impression from talking to a number of builders, again through my new job, I have been hearing from a lot of them that the market is rapidly coming up to them.
Oh, no
and the market has come quicker in some ways than it took the builders to. Sometimes I hear that.
No question about that. But that's where it is going. No question about that either, right? So that's what you're doing now. How long have you been?
Just over 6 months. It was in the fall that I started, and been learning a lot about buildings. Been learning a lot about transportation. Been learning a lot about renewable gas and what's happening with sort of the bioeconomy, broadly speaking. It's a fascinating time, and it is really a time, I think, for BC and for the North and for Prince George to sort of flex our muscles and really now, all these years later, take our great natural endowments, our great human endowments, the know-how that we have in industry, the innovation and knowledge that we're generating at places like the college and the university, and really bring this together and really show everybody.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, the other thing that I read when I went through some of your material from your background is the notion of appurtency.
Yeah.
So where does that? A lot of people don't really know. They
I'm
hear
hearing
it,
everyone
but they really
turning
don't
it off
know.
now. No.
They really don't know. What is it? So what is it?
So there's this
Where
thing.
does it come from in your case?
Yeah. No. Appurtenancy is this weird thing that nobody has heard of, but if you live in northern BC, you have felt the effects of. And what appurtenancy was sort of a rule in the government, in the provincial government, dating back well before the 50s, but it really took hold in sort of post-war, where if you were going to cut down a tree somewhere to make it into something, you had to make it into something in that place. So you couldn't go to Fort Nelson, cut down a tree, put it on a truck, bring it to Vancouver and make it into a 2x4. You had to do that sort of in the area of Fort Nelson. And so to some degree, our communities in the north have all benefited from that, even though, again, most people have never heard the term. It was actually eliminated as a rule about a decade and a half ago now. But it's, for me, what I found so interesting about it, again, learning about the North and about the development of regions like this and the role of the university. This was all when I was at Unbc doing my coursework, that I came across this, because it was somewhat like your story about the founders. And it took people like you and Murray and Horst. They had to get in vehicles, drive to the political convention, lobby, like that had to be done to get the university. And so I started to think, well, what policy does government have for helping regional development? Looking at places like Scandinavia, they had a number of things in place. And I thought, well, what do we have? And so this was one of the things that we had, that there was this sort of this marriage, in a sense, between communities and their adjacent resources. And at the time that I was doing my work on appurtenancy, it was for my master's degree, so I was doing my thesis on it.
So was that the project you did on your...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
for your thesis, right?
Yeah, it was about appurtenancy.
Yeah.
And so at the time, there were mills being shut down in Mackenzie and Fort St. James. And I remember, because I went to those communities to document what was going on for my research, and they were talking about, if we're cutting down trees in this area, they should be processed here. And so this was very central to the economic stability of a lot of communities in the north. But again, very few people knew the term. I found that still amazing that this one policy was so central to the economics of so many communities that people just don't know people don't know about it. So what I started to think about was, what's the modern equivalent of this? That if appurtenancy is sort of from the early to mid 1900s, if it really came into force through the middle part of the century, when there were a lot of mills being developed in the post-war era. You would know more about that than me. But then this policy technology also changes. In the 80s, you see huge investments in technology that allowed for the first time, I think, that productivity of mills could rise, but employment didn't rise at the same level. That started to happen. And so what was going on here? And I was thinking, well, what can we do today? You don't want to just be a victim of technological change. And so I started to think about appurtenancy in different ways, more around knowledge, more around the marriage, in a sense, not just of a community to its adjacent resources, whether they're trees in that case, but how about know-how and what people know about the resource. Maybe that could evolve over time, and this know-how could be deployed in new ways. And so to keep current, that maybe it didn't just need to be about 2x4s and panels. Maybe we could think about this forest resource in new ways. And so, and maybe that would evolve over time. And so that's kind of what my thesis was about, how maybe in today's society, there should be something called, what I called knowledge appurtenancy. So it was a place and the smarts of a place, the know-how within a place could be applied to their resources. Not just those resources were owed to the place, it went the other way as well.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did a lot of my research on, and that still sort of sits with me every day, that it all comes back to what does a place, a particular location, do to survive and continue to thrive, and for a place like this, again, thinking about a future where there's a carbon-constrained world, like within the next 20 years, or 30 years, the goal is to go net zero. What does that mean for Prince George? What does that mean for Northern BC? What does that mean for British Columbia? What does that mean to the industries we have today? How can we position those? To me, that's knowledge of pertinency. It's taking our smarts, applying it to our place, and making things work for the situation and the circumstances that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting that you say this, the whole notion of prudency, correctly so, was kind of a notion that applied to the forest industry in particular. Yeah, but could apply to a lot of other resources as well.
Yeah.
It is saying that the forest industry is a unique model where, the timber in British Columbia, by and large, probably 98% of it, belongs to you and me, the people.
That's right.
And so that means that from evolving of forest policy, there was always not only how do you access timber, by getting a license or tenure, where you have renewable license,
right.
and it all kind of evolved from in the late 50s, in mid 40s, late 50s, around the Prince George area. There used to be 600 sawmills here.
Yeah, that's right.
And the sawmill would go to the bush to cut the wood. And then they would cut not much volume, one truckload, maybe two, and they would haul it into Plainer Row. Well, where was Plainer Row? It was where the railroad is. That's where River Road is now. Yeah. The only company left there virtually is Brink Forest Products.
Yeah, I've heard of them,
in Lakeland. So that was Plainer Road. That's called now River Road. And but the point that I was going to make is that so it evolved. This is not all that long ago.
Nope.
My lifetime, I was born in 1940. That's when it was that way here. Just using me as an example by age. And then, as you indicated, when you did your thesis on it, where the pressure came on, where less and less people controlled more and more of the fiber, and then the log would travel to the mill, and the mill may be a long way away from the community where it was harvested.
Right.
And so there was then an underlying obligation, not always recognized by tenure holders, that there is a social obligation to return to the province social and economic value.
Right.
And preferably in the location where it is harvested. And obviously that became a big issue, in particular in early 2000, and the policy of appurtency and some other policies in terms of forest policy were kind of eliminated by the then in the early 2000s by the then government. But still we are looking at that still today as it relates to the carbon footprint. How do we plant more? How do we manage our forest resource better than we do today? How do we grow more fiber per hectare? How can we manage the forest better?
Right.
There is no place in the world where an absolutely unbelievable forest can be grown better than it does in the interior of the province of British Columbia. And
I agree, and I find what's interesting to watch now. I think, as you say, there was that period of consolidation. I'm really curious to see, as we sit here today in 2022, I'm really curious if we were having the same conversation in 10 years, what's happened? If we were to look now back at these next 10 years, I'm really curious to see.
Forward or back?
The next 10 years.
Next 10.
What's going to happen? How will this work? How do we connect this social element with carbon, with forest products, things like mass timber and different kinds of products.
Such an appropriate thought, because I'm deeply involved in all of that, because I'm, as you know, the umbrella organization for the forest companies in British Columbia is the Council of Forest Industry. And, and I'm the longest serving director on the Council of Forest Industry, and the only one that has no timber, and I'm also the vice chair. Can you believe it? and I'm an advocate of adding more social and economic value. We employ 400 people, but we don't cut a single tree. I believe where the future lies, Rob, is that the sawmill of the future, and although we see some restructuring now because of beetle kill and other things that have reduced the annual allowable cut, that I believe the future lies in innovative primary. That means not just making spaghetti, and combination with intensive secondary. That's where the future lies. Becoming better tenure, better stewards to our resource, growing more forest, and then manufacturing more. That if the sawmill now becomes one that is still in transition, where the objective is to cut more volume through the sawmill, employ less people. And it will go the other way, where we are not necessarily volume oriented, but value oriented. And then examples of what can be is a company like Brink sitting up the street, my company. I started it in 1975. We employ 400 people.
Yeah.
And I've operated for 47 years. And I guarantee you, we will double in size in the next 5 years. And how we will do it is innovative products for new products for new markets, and then at the same time, pushing forward the idea of the center of excellence, where we can develop new equipment, the new entrepreneurship, new products for new markets, not just the same old dimension, 2 before 2 and on and on and on. No. We have all of the things that it takes. Now we have to develop the skill sets, hence Unbc, CNC, Center of Excellence, where we become the leaders, not only as it relates to the footprint and all the other things related to the things that you're doing, but to attract an industry that specializes in those areas. And they can and will be successful in that. We are.
What do you see as the main triggers for the innovation? So when you're talking about new products, what is stimulating that? Is it taller wooden buildings like what we saw? Is it different sort of strengths versus weight? Like what's driving the new products?
The new products is going to be mass timber to a certain extent. Is something to do. I wrote a business plan in 1975, 47 years ago, that already included then laminating of timber into different products. It already then included the idea of finger jointing and doing other things. And it's still in my business plan today that I had then 47 years ago. And on that I started this company. It will go much further. We intend to build any of development that we do in our commercial site. It's sitting on the end of, you probably know where it is. Will all be built with CLT, and then we have also property here where I want to develop a CLT tower of about 16 or 70 stories. Never announced it, but that's what I want to do.
You just did.
I just did. We will do that. We will lead the way, and because I believe that's where the future is. Hence, I'm talking to the University of Northern British Columbia, Jeff Kane, and the same is, we're very blessed with having those kind of people, and then the same with Dr. Dennis Johnson from CNC, and we need that center of excellence, because that's where we will develop the skill sets, entrepreneurship, and where we will develop technology that is utilized in terms of manufacturing new products for new markets, but also managing the land base in terms of where we can have robots, managing the land base, managed by satellites and other things that automatically manage that resource, and we will increase the yield per hectare by at least 50%. So where we will have, like in Sweden, but we have seen 35 sawmills have been shut down in British Columbia, and the annual allowable cut has been reduced by half.
Yeah.
They had the same in Sweden. Where now today they got, again, doing as one part, not all the parts, but approaching it from a different angle. They grow more forest per hectare, and now they're in a situation where they do not have enough conversion or sawmill capacity to handle all the wood. And that's exactly where we will go. Not saying, okay, well, we're done now, we'll invest our money elsewhere.
Right.
No. What we now have to do is look at it and saying the industry is in transition. We are all part of that. That brings back the idea of the social contract. That is, if you have the privilege of access to timber, we demand that you then, part of that is a social contract, to a certain extent, a potency in a way.
In a way.
And then, and at the same time, reward those that add more value.
Right.
And we still are not there in terms of policy now, but government policy is moving in that direction.
So do you see then, so with mass timber, typically people would look to those products to replace things like steel, so that you would be able to have, which to date at least, hard to know where R&D will go in that direction as well, but to date, steel is a fairly high carbon emitter in the production. Wood stores carbon and is a renewable resource. And so I think people have been talking about mass timber a lot as a sort of a carbon story. Yeah. Do you see the same? Do you see this movement really being around basically the carbon constrained world?
It's all happening as we speak.
Yeah.
No question about it. Unstoppable. No question about it. And that will follow industry, entrepreneurship will follow it because they see that as an investment that will create rewards for them, and then government policy has to follow that too. That has not quite happened there. Like, we struggle all this. We want to double the size of our company. Double it. And what is our problem? Access to fiber. So that, that area still has not been sorted out the way it should be, but it will be.
Right.
No question about it. And people like myself and others are speaking about it louder and louder and louder, and not only doing it, but also doing it physically. Great potential.
Yeah, agreed. That's why, that's why I wanted to be in this space. I think the change that we're witnessing right before our eyes, living through, I think is fascinating. And I think, or sometimes I worry that climate change has a negative connotation, and obviously it's not a good news story by any stretch of the imagination. But it doesn't mean that we have to sort of accept it to be a disaster. I think
it creates new opportunities.
It does.
No question.
It can, and I think we need to be open to that. And
maybe the names on the buildings will change, but there will be new entrepreneurs that come forward that see those opportunities and will take advantage of. Because how can you beat living in this country, in this province, in this area, with all the resources that we have? It is a entrepreneur's paradise. In terms of location to the marketplace. And sometimes what has to happen, there has to be a shake-up, and all of a sudden new capital will move in. But the key is to have, that, as I said to you earlier, and when I made my presentation at CNC, when we donated part of our getting that building done, and when I was involved with Unbc, and I believe so deeply in the center of excellence, we must have the skill sets that without that, and we will not attract the capital, even if we have the resources. But we must be ahead of it and develop the skill sets.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you disagree with that?
an amazing discussion.
Yeah, I really
between
enjoyed it.
us,
Thanks, John.
and amazing to kind of look back at your life and at UNBC, and then all the way through. You have left or are living an absolutely amazing life in the most beautiful place, as you well know. Okay, so the other thing that so what I did is I wrote a book. It took me 80 years to live it, 20 years to think about it, 2 years to write it, and so I've done it.
That sounds about right, actually.
Yeah,
it's a good. Those are good proportions. Sounds like a few term papers we've all written, doesn't it?
And so I did it, and and I'm going to give you a copy of it. And I'm going to sign it. Rob, again,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you. Terrific. I hope there's a little bit in here about appurtenancy. I don't know. We'll see.